My name is Elizabeth Aloni. I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media is the largest media company in New York City. We publish over 70 newspapers, magazines, websites, webinars, podcasts, and events throughout Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, Westchester, Long Island, and Philadelphia. And today we are thrilled to bring to you phenomenal experts to discuss divorce 101, love, law, and finance. I'd like to welcome Jill Stone.
Is she, you can't hear her, right? Elizabeth, can you hear me?
I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry.
Elizabeth.
I'd like to welcome Jill Stone, who is our matrimonial and family attorney of Jill Stone Law. As a specialty law practice, Jill has been honored for her extensive casework with divorce and children since 1986. Her all-female law firm also represents men and children in custody cases. She's a current member of the Law Guardian panel in the Nassau County Family and Supreme Courts and a board of director on the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. We are honored to have her here with us today. Thank you, Jill, for being here.
Thank you.
Next up, I want to share with you Dr. Joan.
This is going to be an issue.
Dr. Joan is a clinical psychologist specializing in psychological assessment and individual and couples therapy. She's a published author, and her latest book is Happy is the New Healthy, available on Amazon pre-order. Dr. Neehall has been in independent practice since 1984 and has been instrumental in facilitating positive change in hundreds of adults and couples for over 25 years. Welcome, Dr. Neehall. We're thrilled to have you. Next up, I want to share with you about Peter Lichtenberg. He's with
I don't know what's happening.
No.
Can anybody hear her?
No. Elizabeth, we can't hear you.
Elizabeth, Elizabeth,
Yes.
you're going in and out, and we just lost you right after you said Peter. And we lost you a few times when you first started, just to let you know. Your picture and your voice.
Thank you. Can you hear me now clearly?
Yes, but you have to go over Peter again because we only heard Peter. Nothing else. No, not happening.
His goal is to help improve people's financial balance and confidence. He creates a personal financial blueprint that serves as your GPS to help achieve your personal and financial goals. In conjunction with his team of trusted professionals, Peter serves as your personal CFO and financial concierge. Welcome, Peter. And then I'd like to introduce to you Victoria McCooey, who is a transformation coach, motivational speaker, and creator of the Reclaim Your Power system. She works with those in toxic, controlling, or otherwise abusive marriages to help them stand up to their abuser and regain control of their lives. Through her writing, speaking, and social media following, Victoria has helped thousands to stand up to an abusive partner.
No. Elizabeth, we lost you again.
She has helped thousands. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we lost you.
We lost you.
So she's helped thousands to stand up to an abusive partner and to create a new life for themselves and their children. And finally, I'd like to welcome Angela Shanerman. Angela is a CDC certified divorce coach whose expertise is focused on supporting people through the overwhelm and stress of the divorce process. Angela also has expertise in domestic violence, the dynamic of the abusive relationship, and emotional abuse recovery, and how these directly relate to the divorce process. Her passion is to empower and to support those dealing with, contemplating or moving on after divorce, and she actively mentors new CDC coaches through the CDC College of Divorce Coaching. Thank you so much for you all being here. Obviously, we have phenomenal experts, and I would like to get started talking about the law around divorce. And having a great attorney is truly so integral in the divorce process. So Jill, can you tell us a little bit about your practice?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me. And I use all these professionals that you've asked to be on the panel today in my practice. Not maybe these particular people, but I'm glad you introduced me to them because they could certainly help my clients because everybody is needed in the whole divorce practice. I have a matrimonial and family law practice in Garden City. I'm very close to all the court houses. I have a law office in Queens, which is a family-based practice. So we're close to the Queens courts there as well. My office prides itself on doing what we call the team approach, which is teamwork. And we know that the definition of teamwork is the combined action of a group, especially when effective and efficient. And that's the mantra in my office. I like when my clients know that when they call my office, all the lawyers who have something to bring to my office in my practice by way of their professional background or their personal background will be available to them to help them at any time. We also experience in this field that, they say death is -- stress factor and then divorce. I have some clients that said that their divorce was more stressful than their exposure to a death situation. But it's a very time of need and emotion, and to have lawyers that are available to you to help you through every part of the process is what's very important. And that's what my office likes to do when you come here, and we like to guide you. It's a very, very, very crazy process out there. Okay, you can't even imagine what goes on in the court system. You can't imagine how long things take. You can't imagine how your story isn't the first story that the court heard. So you really have to tell the court who you are if you decide to go to court. There are cases that you don't have to go to court with, which really are the best ones because you have the client maintains their control over their case. Once you go into court, you lose a lot of control because you're letting, a judge, lawyers that are involved really conduct your case. So we like to do a team approach. Everybody knows about your situation in my office. We will use all the professionals to help you. And it's something that the lawyer that you choose, you have to be very comfortable with. It has to be your type of person. Lawyers have different types of ways of handling things, and you have to be comfortable with the way that your case is going to be handled.
Wow, all very important points, and why it's so important choosing the right attorney is so important in making sure that it's a whole firm that you can rely on.
Absolutely.
So, Jill, would you share with us what are the essentials for one to think about when they're getting a divorce?
Okay, well, I believe that everybody, when you're thinking about getting divorced or you're in a divorce or you're contemplating what may happen to you down the road, you have to become educated. Being educated is the most important thing in anything I think that you can do, but especially in your divorce situation. So in any type of marriage partnership that you're in, you have different roles. Some go to work and they pay the bills and they do some tasks. There are people in the relationship that deal with the children and they deal with all the schooling and all the doctors. Well, whichever position you're in, you have to become very versed in the other party's position that they have portrayed in the relationship. So if you're not responsible for the children or didn't know really what's going on and you're contemplating a divorce, well, you better get up to speed with knowing the portals that your children are with their schoolwork, who the doctors are, who their friends are, who the parents are. These are all things that are going to be very, very important as you move forward in a divorce case. If you're the person who dealt with all that type of issues in the marriage and you don't know about bills and how they're being paid and about the finances, you're on a joint account, but you've never been to a bank, well, you better show up at that bank now. Your name is on the account. You could go look at what's coming in and out of the account. yo, my spouse or my partner has a business. Well, what about the business? Was it acquired during the marriage? You know, how many employees do they have? What about tax returns? Everything's electronic now. Did you ever really look at a tax return? Better make sure you speak to the accountant, or you look at a tax return, you know what's going on. It's very, very important to educate yourself. It's important to get yourself ready emotionally. Okay, if there's things, if you've been in a domestic violence relationship or a bullying relationship or an abusive relationship, you know, seek out a mental health professional now. Seek out a coach. Try to see how you're going to go through the court system or a matrimonial action, and also keep your mental health in check while you're doing it. Very, very important. You're worried about now your children. Your children's life is going to change. Don't forget, the children didn't stand up and say, I'm going to pick you as a mother and you as a father. They're the people that really are innocent in any divorce action. So now you have to worry about yourself. You're worried about your finances. You're worried about your children. Make sure your children are okay. If there are things that are happening in their lives, teenagers, it's not only a divorce action. Teenagers have their own issues with social media and everything that's happening. You have to make sure that you put everything in place before you move forward. If you are not capable of having the coping mechanisms that you need, or being educated about your finances or your children or your whole relationship, you're not going to be able to be an asset to yourself in navigating your divorce case. That's the most important thing that I think everybody needs to do. You have to be versed in every part of your relationship, no matter what it is. That's utmost importance.
Wow, that's a lot. It really shows you why you really need a team of support around you during a divorce, and to be able to work with an attorney who has the tentacles and the thought process to each of these pieces that you need to think about. It's not just filing a piece of paper. This is much more. It's much more in depth than that.
It's much more in depth, and sometimes people don't realize that the things that they're saying or doing can actually hurt them down the road. So if you're really contemplating divorce or you know, separating, and you have to know that your own behavior is going to be looked at. Once you file those papers, you're in a fishbowl and everybody's looking at you. That's basically what it is. If it's not an amicable situation, there are divorce cases that can be amicable. You know, we're not a law firm that wants to take your money. You know, the best thing to do is come to terms of what you can, be amicable. There are people that their cases get very much out of control because they've held in the anger. Why? Because they never got the mental health intervention that they need. They never got the financial security to know where they're going to be next. They never got the life coach there to say, you know, listen, I'm a little insecure in this part. What should I do? So you should do all that before, because that will make you strong and will be able to help yourself through this process, which is, it's a hard process to go through. But the more you know and the more knowledgeable you are and the more help that you've received, the easier it will be for everybody, and especially the party, the mother, the father, the wife, the husband, whoever it is.
Thank you for that. That really is so important, that it's not just the legal, it's also the mental health. And which brings me to Dr. Neehall in terms of the critical part of mental health. Tell me a little bit about your practice and how you help people going through divorce.
You know, it's never been a case in my practice that a couple sees me and they'll say to me, you know what, Joan, we've both decided we want a divorce. It's never like that. It's one person wanting the divorce and the other one reeling back in shock and feelings of abandonment. What do you do with that? Well, the first thing I look for is contempt. I look at the ways in which the couple is communicating with each other. And if there's contempt there, it certainly does not augur well for a good relationship. It augurs well for a good divorce, and they need to go to you, Jill. So what are we talking about? The first thing I will do with a couple is facilitate the grief process, because this is a death. But unfortunately, it's a death that continues through life. There's no finality in it, you know? And so we're talking about things like denial, anger, depression, bargaining, finally acceptance. And I like to add another piece into the mix. I like to go into meaning and purpose, because from meaning and purpose, we can move into hope, into the next chapter of life. So I think of Ken right now. Ken is 47 years old. He's an entrepreneur. He came to me on his own, totally distraught. Jill, his wife, is a young, successful attorney, and she had announced to him that she wanted a divorce. Now, they've got 2 children, ages 10 and 8, respectively. He was devastated. So I said to him, you know, why not bring her in for a session? Let's see what can happen. So he brings her in, and she tells me in front of him, look, I have no respect for this guy. He has not been a good provider. I have no compatibility with him. I don't want to have sex with him. I want to have nothing to do with him. I want out. And more important, I've replaced him. So why is he still here? Now, look, this was not news to Ken. Ken knew this before, but he was in acute denial. He didn't want to accept that this was happening. And in fact, to leave that relationship, she gave him the carrot stick and said, look, if you leave the matrimonial home, maybe I'll start feeling differently towards you. So he leaves the home. And guess what? After a couple of months and therapy, he realizes this is going nowhere really fast. He buys a house close to where her house is so that he could enjoy joint custody with the children. And to Jill's credit, what happens in that situation is that she and Ken get together with the children and explain to the children that it has nothing to do with them. It's not their fault. And more important, mom and dad will always be there for them. But as husband and wife, that's gone, but we love each other, we'll continue traditions with you. And that was such a healthy divorce. Now I think of another case right now, Tom. Tom is a very successful CEO. He'd been married for 30 years, and in his situation, his marriage was wonderful in the sense that it gave him everything he thought he needed except for one piece, the sexual piece. They had 2 daughters. His wife was a successful, accomplished musician. They loved one another. That was not the problem. They were the quote unquote stellar family. Everyone in the community looked up to them. The problem was that he realized that he was gay, and he didn't know how to disclose this to Mary without crushing her. And he was worried that it might destroy his adult children. The girls were then at university, you see. In the end, he tells her, Mary goes through her own grief. They work it through together, and then they discuss it with their adult children. Now, he was really scared because his children, his daughters, were very, very close to him. And he was scared that once he told them this, they would not want to have anything to do with him. But you know, to Mary's credit and to his credit, they were able to discuss it in such a way that the children understood that they would still be having Thanksgiving rituals, and all the rituals would remain the same. Mary, by the way, was a good cook. So those are 2 examples of a healthy divorce.
Well, it sounds like you really helped those people move from anger to a place where they could work together and be able to not only do what's best for each other, but also what was best for their family as a whole.
Yes, and the piece I keep talking about is meaning, because within the grief process, we can go up to acceptance, but I like to go into meaning. It's just like the pandemic. What's the meaning behind it all? What can we learn from this? And how can we move that forward into the next chapter of our lives so that it's growthful?
So then what would be your best tip for someone who's going through a divorce? Obviously, you have a wealth of tips that you can give people to help them. But if you could give them one jewel to keep in mind, as you say about meaning, you know, maybe how did they get to the meaning, or, you know, how did they focus on the meaning, or where do they even start? What would be your tip to them?
There's so many to give, but the most important is to remember that the marriage failed. You didn't fail. That you do not have to go on a steady diet of self-blame. That's ridiculous. The marriage, the system failed. You didn't fail. The other thing is that we're in a pandemic. Now, we all know that pandemics are accelerators in relationships. We get a spike, not just the COVID spike, but a spike in divorces, a spike in marriages, a spike in births. Is this the time to overreact or overprotect? Are we being fragile? Are we holding each other to ransom? And is this part of COVID-19? Is this the way we respond to collective grief, to isolation, to stable ambiguity? What are we doing in here? And I think right now of a story I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you about John and Carol. John and Carol mentioned to me in January, you know, Joan, we're going to have a divorce. We've been together for 23 years, but here's the thing. We love each other, but we aren't in love. but we're good friends. Then guess what happens? Along comes COVID. Just when they were thinking of going their separate ways, they were stuck together in lockdown. And what happened with this couple was fascinating to me because they started exchanging love notes. They started being intimate, sharing vulnerabilities with each other. They started to know each other. And the last time I heard from them, they said to me, you know what, we've fallen into like, and we put the divorce on hold. So what I'm saying is make sure that your head and your heart are in alignment when you go to jail and ask for a divorce. Just make sure that you're not overreacting because of the situation you're in.
That's wonderful. It's a wonderful tip. And especially now with COVID and everything that is going on, that everything is heightened emotionally, and to make sure that you're really making the right decision. Thank you so much for that. You know, moving from emotional, I mean, obviously emotional is such a big piece, but, you know, people also fear around financial, you know, what's going to happen to them? What should they do? So Peter, can you share with us a little bit, how do you help people with their finances? Particularly going through such a difficult time?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm one of 4 children, and my spouse is 2 of 3, and out of the 7, 4 of them are divorced. So we live in over 50% of our immediate family have gone through the divorce process. And sometimes it could be very good, and sometimes it could be very, very ugly. In answer to your question, really what I do is serve as a financial coach. Tiger Woods needs a coach all the time on the golf course. Michael Jordan needed a coach to help them to be very, very good at what they do. And I serve as a coach to help people who are going through this type of crisis. I help them get financially organized. Most of the time, one spouse handles all the financial decisions and the other spouse has no clue. I help the spouse self-discover where they are today and where do they want to get to in the future. And then I hopefully act as a financial guide to help them get there when they want to get there, the way they want to get there. I would say that going through a divorce is like being alive to pay your estate tax. I mean, very often would you go in with 100%, you come out with 50%. So not always the best thing.
So important is, obviously you're saying, is to make a plan that is specific to an individual's goals.
Absolutely, all the time. Just like running a business, every business owner has to have a business plan. And here, all of a sudden, the spouse has to realize they are now the CEO and CFO of their home. So they need to have a business plan on where they are and where they want to go.
Okay, wonderful. So what other pieces of, do you have a couple more pieces of financial advice that you would have for people going through divorce? Obviously would be to sit down and get clear about what their objectives are in the short term and the long term. What would be some of the other financial advice that you would give? If you could just give them maybe 2 other pieces of financial advice. Again, I know that you have so many more to give, but we only have a short time.
Well, let me just share this before I give that advice, is that my job is really to understand the individual. And it's not about just telling them what to do. It's understanding the philosophy that they've been raised in or experienced around money. Again, one spouse might have seen how their husband or their wife, maybe one was a gambler, maybe one was a very big saver. So you have to really adapt to the individual philosophies and help them become financially literate around that world. In regards to pieces of advice, we do, just like a doctor, we do a comprehensive financial x-ray. We might want to sit there and revise down the risk tolerance of their current investment portfolios, or suggest they speak to their investment advisor. We want them to be diversified. We might even talk to them about getting a new CPA, because maybe the CPA was the other spouse's, or it was a CPA for one of the spouse's business. So we want someone to come in totally objective and looking at their finances, who has not been related to either one. When I talk about getting financially organized, that also means getting all your legal documents in place. getting your healthcare proxy updated, getting your power of attorney, having the bank accounts changed, as Jill said earlier, having your investment, and most very importantly, the retirement accounts, having the beneficiary designations changed. Often people might have gone through divorce and never made those changes, and one of the spouses passed away, and all of a sudden the money didn't go to the current spouse, it went to the original spouse because those changes were never made. Also in getting financially organized, speaking with their legal team to make sure that all their assets are set up in the right type of trust structures. We want to protect against predators and creditors. Let's see, well, then I talk about the spouse who is responsible for possibly paying alimony. That is, again, analogous to a key man or key person in a business. In a business, if that key person gets sick, injured, or passes away, that is a very big blow to the business's balance sheet. So what we need to do is make sure, possibly doing, through a term policy that addresses both critical illness, chronic illness, and death, that ensures the person responsible for making sure those alimony payments are going to be made or responsible to be paid. Let's see, what else can I tell you?
So it sounds like, it's really kind of a re-looking at your finances, very much what Jill, you were saying, that you have to really re-look at each piece of your life, when you're going through a divorce, and take a look at everything you've had before, whether it be life insurance or whether it be, bank accounts, each individual piece, and look at it with new eyes.
Well, some of the things that Peter is speaking about happens during the divorce and after the divorce as well. So in order to use the services of someone like Peter that could be able to guide you, the person has to know what they have. Many times clients come because they were not involved with the finances. They don't know their retirement. They don't know about if they have IRAs. They don't know about any pensions that they're entitled to from their spouse. What we do in our consultation, which is very important, that helps people, is that in every matrimonial, there must be an exchange of what's called the statement of net worth. And each party fills that out and it's exchanged and it's notarized under oath. The lawyers certify it. So the person who's thinking about a divorce does their inquiry first and does their research and is knowledgeable will know if something is being left out of their other spouses or the other party's statement of net worth. So it's very important. That's why you start at the beginning, because all the things that Peter needs and he can help with are things that you're going to have to be giving him. You have to give him the information. What about this life insurance policy with the death benefit? What about this? Because at the end of the divorce, there's a stipulation of settlement or a trial, and the judge addresses all those issues, and we address all those issues in a final document. So we do make sure that that the beneficiary has to be changed. Peter, you would go to your financial advisor to make sure everything is done. But you have to be educated first to be able to give the information to somebody like Peter to guide you.
Very important to be able to take, not only, as Dr. Neehall was talking about, take an emotional analysis of what you're doing and where you've been, but also taking a financial analysis of where you are and making sure that you uncover all the documents that you need. And obviously this is, where a great attorney comes in to be able to help you even know what to know. I think part of these type of things is sometimes you just don't even know what you don't know. And so being able to know that and have the experts, from an attorney to a therapist to financial. And what about coaches? Where do divorce coaches come in? I want to hear a little bit more about that because it's very interesting. I'd love to talk with you, Victoria. You've been through this, and it's led you to this career. So I'd love to know, what is a transformation coach?
I would love to tell you. First of all, let me say what an amazing panel this is that you've put together, because if I had had this sort of information before I entered into my divorce, what a difference it would have made in my life. To get all of this information, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And this is critical for people to be aware of all these pitfalls they can avoid if they get the right information. So a transformation coach is, I help people specifically who are in abusive marriages, either during the marriage, when they're contemplating divorce. A lot of the times they don't think they can even leave. They're nervous that there won't be a way out because they feel so controlled and sabotaged by the controlling partner. And also after divorce, it's because it doesn't end. If you have children, you're still dealing with a controlling, and this is when it flares up even more sometimes, because when the narcissist feels like they've lost the control that they once had over you, now they're scrambling to find another way to control you, and it's usually through the children, and it's a whole other level of issues. Parental alienation is one of the fallouts from this sort of thing. So I guide my clients on how to handle all of these transitions and transformations. I call it transformation because they're literally changing everything about themselves. I mean, they have been compromised to such an extent by the abuse they've suffered, and I too was in this sort of abusive marriage, and people would never have believed when it was happening to me, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that you don't flip a switch and suddenly you're in this controlling situation. It's a very slow process. It evolves over time. It's like a slow drip, and sometimes you don't even see the abuse happening until it's so far gone that you can't undo it. And by this time, usually you have children and you have worries about, what would happen, and you really feel stuck. So that's where I help people transform to reclaim the power that's been taken from them. And, I love what Jill said about getting yourself together before you enter into a divorce, because I think that's the key. Is, for instance, when I entered into my divorce, I was very compromised, and I presented in a very bad way. And my divorce took 6 years. It was because I had no control, and the system just took off without me. I was along for the ride, and my ex-husband controlled, and his attorney controlled the whole thing and abused me again during the divorce process. So that is when I really decided that I couldn't let this happen to other people. I had to figure out a way to help and get into the driver's seat in your divorce. So I spent, a decade maybe doing volunteer work for the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So I was trained to be the advocate who showed up at the hospital when a domestic violence issue presented. So I had this very small window of time to coach the victim and to open, I'm going to say she because it was most usually a woman, to coach her into believing that there were other alternatives besides returning to the abusive situation. So that was such amazing, fulfilling work for me that I knew I had to take that and make a career out of it, because I was spending all of my off time doing that, and I had a big job in the city and commuting every day. And, so I left my advertising job in New York, and I created this business years ago. And now, and I've become certified as a life coach. And so I've taken all of this and sort of melded it together so that I'm taking these people who are just a shell of a person when they come to me. They've been so beaten down and so compromised, and they're so fearful. And I try to help them change their mindset, see their situation from a different perspective, because a lot of times they have the control, they just can't see it. So I try to give them that power back. And then they're able to go into a divorce with much more wherewithal, with more information, with less fear, and more power. And they're able to stay in the driver's seat over the course of what it takes to get out of one of these horrible relationships.
Wow, it's very powerful to be able to use your pain to do such important work with people. What would you say to someone who's in an abusive relationship as a first step to move forward? Would you say go to Jill? Would you say learn about yourself? What would your advice?
When I first started my business, I really thought that that attorneys would be referring their clients to me. Hopefully, that was my hope, but it's turned out to be the other way. People are coming to me before, and which is really ideal, I think, before they go to the attorney, because I get them in a place where they're ready for the attorney. The attorney it's going to cost a whole lot more for the attorney to help you emotionally get to where you need to be. I think I see Jill shaking her head. Yes. You don't want to spend all that time having the attorney have to hold your hand and guide you through and repeat things 100 times because, you're compromised. Are you about to say something? I thought Jill was about to say something.
We could tell when somebody's in a very bad state. And very often, myself and my associates in my office tell clients that they're not ready for this yet, because it will only, yeah, and they look at me because they want to, here's the retainer fee. I say, I don't want your retainer fee because you're not going to be happy and it's not going to work for you. You need to go get yourself straightened out, get some strength. Listen, and I always say I'm not a mental health professional, but you certainly need one. You need a coach. You need a mental health intervention because they are beaten down. And by the way, I've had a lot of men that are beaten down recently as well. Okay.
Right. And I have men in my program too.
Right.
And I take male clients, and it's true.
It's true. And COVID has brought it to another level, as we've heard, with other issues that the parties are experiencing, and the children are experiencing. But I hold your hand to a certain point, and then when I see that this is not going to go anywhere, they really need to get the help and be prepared. As Victoria said, you're in a whirlwind. If you're going into court, you have no idea the ride you're in for. Okay. And of course, we don't let any other lawyer, take control. But besides that, you're in for a ride. And there's some things that we do not have control over because, again, you're putting your life and your children's life and your future in a stranger's hand, a judge who doesn't know anything about you. He has the same story, a little bit different, aspects to it. The names have changed, but they've heard it all, So I think getting prepared is very important.
Right. So I help them get prepared in every way, emotionally. I work on them physically too. I work on their diet, their exercise, they've been compromised. They a lot of times haven't taken, the kids are up to date with all their shots, but they haven't been to a doctor in 5 years. They've not taken care of themselves because they feel worthless and like a victim. So it's a holistic sort of coaching where I help them. Also, the little piece that I really love that really is what lights me up is that I help them think about what their life is going to look like on the other side already. So it puts the divorce in a different perspective. It's not this derailing thing that overrides their whole life. It's something that has to be dealt with, but they're working towards something much happier and much better. So it keeps it in a different perspective for them. So they just don't want to, lie down and die because it can get really difficult.
That's really powerful. Thank you. And for Jill saying as well, how important it is to make sure that you're in the right spot before going through divorce. Angela, can you share a little bit with us, because you also are a divorce coach, but I'd love to hear more about CDC and how you work with clients. Can you share with us?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me on this panel, and the wealth of knowledge that you're giving out to your community is wonderful. So as a CDC certified coaches, I do support both men and women that are contemplating divorce. They might be in the should I stay, should I go? They don't know what divorce is. It's a term that's thrown around like just get divorced. Or they're in the legal process now and they're overwhelmed with the paperwork. They need to get organized, and it just can be so overwhelming, all the decisions that need to be made. Or it's post-judgment. You know, a lot of times the divorce might have been, you know, pretty amicable, but now things come out afterwards. So I support people in all phases of their decision-making that's concerning them. And I become their thinking partner. For a lot of times, I'm the first person that really has listened to them and really hear what they're saying. You know, they might have had friends or family telling them what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Divorce the law's kind of black and white. You know, it's kind of, there's formulas, it's papers, but there's the whole emotional side that goes with that legal process, because everything is happening to your family, to your finances, to your children, to your family home, to career. Like maybe you've been a stay-at-home mom, or you had your own business, and now everything just changes on the dime, and it's happening now, and it's impacting you into the future. So there's a whole overwhelming process of decisions that need to be made, and these decisions impact you now into the future with your family and your kids. So what I do is, create that safe, non-judgmental environment for those clients to really get honest and really, tell the truth on themselves, where they are. You have to know where you are to know where you want to go and how to get out. So I'm like that partner that goes arm in arm with you through that process. If you were to jump out of a plane and go skydiving, you have that support person there right with you. So I, support people in having the best possible outcome for themselves. And we go through the whole decision-making process, really get to the core of who they are and what it is they want, so they can create that vision even when they don't see it, because there's so much doom and gloom. It's expensive, you'll go bankrupt, you'll lose your kids. It's all about the fear. And I help people with their mindset, because, that's really impacting them, their limiting beliefs about divorce, and really creating that vision to get them through to the other side. But really hold it to them that this could really be an opportunity of grace and a new beginning, to let go a lot of those fears, and really just, I am a thinking partner and sounding board, and I support both men and women. I'm for workability of families. My divorce process led to this mission, also similarly like Victoria, and we really have to get back and help our own world here in our home first, with all the pain and suffering that's going on with families. And I too have seeing a tremendous uprising in consults now during this quarantine time, with people being at home, or just having their world just turned on a dime for them, whether it's a job, or homeschooling their kids, or things, the releases that they may have had, they're not being able to do. And I just want to support people. They're jumping into quicksand. You may come up for air a little bit, but I know how to get you out. I've been through the process. I'm an experienced coach, and I can help you get out to the other side with the minimal impact.
That's wonderful. So you're kind of their point person to lean on and get an objective support for you as you move through the process.
Absolutely.
Really
Absolutely. Because once you could have clarity, then you could be confident in your decision making, and then you could, be credible and organized for your attorney. Once we tease out concerns and fears and unknowns, because there's so much uncertainty about divorce. what's going to happen. So I help ease that uncertainty with them so they can have that clarity to make the best decisions possible for their life.
It sounds like, what's important is putting together the right team when you're going through
Absolutely.
divorce. Jill, do you want to speak to that?
You always have, like I started to say, we're teamwork, not only in my office, and my associates bring their personal experience. I have associates here that have been through the process as well, as Angela just mentioned, and they don't mind sharing and explaining that, you know what, like Victoria says, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I thought I was doomed and I went through it and it was horrible. But so I have people that in my office that express their experience and share them. And I also have the associates in the office as part of the team that have experience with commercial litigation and all types of finances. So they could also explain the process. When people come just to even get a consultation because they have a lot of fear, for someone to explain the process along the way and manage their expectations and know that they could have a team in my office, a team outside of the office with coaches, mental health professionals, financial experts, it helps allay their anxiety and fear so that their brain could actually sit and say, okay, let me get myself together. You know how we all get under stressful, what does it say? The cortisol levels go up, and, when there are people that are in a state of flux and they don't know, they're unhappy, they're in a bad relationship, whether it's abusive or just unloving relationship, they can't think straight. Their stress level, they live like that all the time. So having a team and knowing that they can have a team could really help them. And they need people, even the people that are listening to this, you're not doomed. You have a lot of people out there, you're putting it in the media, so you're giving these people the opportunity to know that there are people out there that can help them through this process. You're not alone, and you need a team, and you do.
And as Victoria said, she wishes she knew this ahead of time. To know all this is so wonderful. We have so many amazing questions. Would it be fine if I asked you some of those questions that we were getting from our attendees? Dr. Neehall, do you think that the lockdown during the pandemic can be positive for couples too?
Definitely. I was about to say this to you, but we ran out of time. Here's the thing. I have couples who establish things like date nights with each other. They dress up. The women put on the war paint. They light candles. I'm thinking right now of Angela. She's a hairstylist. I know she's married to Mark. Well, in lockdown, they're both facing each other all the time. And Angela said to him, well, they've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. She said, you know what, Mark, I'm going to go for a walk. Can you handle the kids? He said, sure. Comes back home and he says to her, you know what, I didn't realize how much work this involved. And so she melted. She said, well, this is appreciation. So then they developed this, during the pandemic, they developed this whole notion of a ritual and routines and structures. So family time, individual time, couple time, date nights were all on. So when the kids were tucked in bed, they would celebrate being an us. They'd dress up, they'd open the front door, go back in, have a meal in a fancy restaurant, namely they made it, lit the candles, and then they discovered something they learned from their children. Kids have an amazing way to play, don't they? They've got this imagination that's so big. So in confinement, we feel we're this way. We're locked down, right? It's called house arrest, right, Jill? But then all of a sudden, you've got this huge world of imagination. And she said to me, you know what the kids taught me? One was Cinderella. The other was Robin Hood. So I said, Mark, let's play that game too. Let's take different roles on. Let's put on different clothes. Let's see what happens in our erotic treasure chest. I think that's so important in lockdown, to focus on the erotic, focus on the things that were normal before. And let's get back into that, can we? Instead of shining the torch on what you didn't do, how about flashing the light on appreciation? On kindness, on gentleness, on your sexuality. These are the things we're not allowed to touch each other, but can we hold our spouses? Can we actually fall in love again? This is what that couple said to me. They said, you know what? We're no longer boring. I'm not sure we want lockdown to stop. And I laughed my head off.
That's terrific. That's wonderful. That's
Great.
wonderful advice and such a wonderful way to think about it. Thank you for that. Victoria, I have a question for you because the question came in about, what if my spouse is behaving badly and yelling all the time? Should I keep my feelings to myself in the pandemic so that my kids don't hear yelling and screaming? What?
Let me tell you, it's a really tough one, especially that we're in lockdown still and we're together so much. So the narcissistic personality, and I'm not a psychiatrist, it's even hard for psychiatrists to diagnose a narcissist. So I'm just talking about people who are way on the spectrum. They've got these traits and they're abusive or controlling. So that's all we're talking about. You don't want to poke the bear when you're in this terrible situation. So I say, I give my clients tips and tricks, some tools to use to block out the abuse. A lot of it is in your head. Like if you cannot separate physically, then you're going to have to come up with some things you can do internally to block out the abuse. It's like putting a wall up. There's a term called gray rock. You can't go no contact. You can't not speak to the person you're living with and co-parenting with, but you can do a gray rock method where you don't give them any emotional fuel to trigger an argument. So it's a very specific way of handling it. But I think that is for right now, until you get all your ducks in a row, until you figure out what your next steps are, you start doing the work of getting all the financials in order, because you may lose access to things the second your spouse knows that this is what you're thinking. Money could get moved around. I mean, you really have to do all your homework. If you have the upper hand of being the one to instigate, then you need to take advantage of that and find out everything you can find out. So you do all that prep work before and work on yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually. I have clients meditate and do rituals in the morning to get them on the right trajectory so that they can handle what's about to happen. So no, I mean, I don't think that you need to poke the bear right now. I think you need to do some inner work and some prep work.
That's great. Thank you. Jill, someone asked, can you change attorneys when you're in the process?
What?
That probably came from someone who now wants to call you.
I don't know about that, but yes, of course, you always have the right to change attorneys, and it happens very often. Happens very often.
And there was a second part to this was, what can someone do about a quote unquote deadbeat dad who won't pay court ordered child support and he claims he's broke? And there might not be a quick answer to this, but
I mean, it all depends on their court orders already. There's like a lot of questions to ask about that. But if there is court orders and somebody is not paying, the family court or the Supreme Court are open now. I mean, they're very limited in certain things that they're doing, and a lot of things are virtual. I'm going to court every hour now via Skype, and I'm in the courtroom with the judges and with the judge that's handling the case. You can file petitions now, and there is something called contempt. If it's a violation of a court order, you could be subjected to jail time if it's a willful violation. So there are things that can be done. But I don't know if there's orders or there's no orders. It's just somebody who doesn't want to pay. If it's somebody that doesn't want to pay, you have to go get a court order. So there's a lot of, questions to
someone popped up here and said he's just ignoring everything the judge has ordered. So it's something that, maybe you need
go to court, and if it's a judge's order, judges do not like their orders to be non-complied with. Okay, there's a court order and it's on paper and you have to comply with it. And if they can't, by the way, it's the person that can't comply that has the obligation to go to court to change it. So, somebody doesn't pay for a long period of time, and then now the recipient brings in a motion and a petition for violation. It can't be waived. All that money that was supposed to be given, it's not retroactively, it can't be waived. They have to pay that money because the burden is on them to go to court and say, I lost my job. A lot of things are happening now with the pandemic. People are losing their jobs. You're still obligated to go to court and ask for a downward modification. So the courts know that there are ways to stop support or to lessen the support. So just not paying is not acceptable.
Okay. I think you'll be getting a phone call. I have a question. I don't know, perhaps Peter can answer this. My soon-to-be ex-husband put $37,000 into an IRA in her name. Last year, he had me sign the papers to have that money taken out of the IRA and put into a joint checking account. I do not know exactly what that money was used for, as he handled all the finances. I received a 1099 form for those $37,000 withdrawal and no benefit from the money. And I left my husband, after Christmas. From a financial perspective, and maybe this isn't something you can answer right now, but is this something that this person should see a financial advisor about or an attorney about?
I would say see an attorney, because it seems like a fraudulent action, and with willful intent to deceive this young lady. And I would also go to CPAs, because often the CPAs can write letters to address those 1099s.
And never sign documents unless you know what they mean, or you have somebody look at it. And even if you're not in a divorce and you're not contemplating it, even if you're in a good marriage, I'm married 39 years. I'm in a very good marriage, and I trust my husband implicitly, but I read a document. I don't think it's because I'm a lawyer. I think because I want to know, you want to be knowledgeable. You want to know, what am I signing? What am I doing? You just don't do it because someone says to do it. And also, if you have children that are listening to everything, and they are, by the way, because I have many people that tell me my kids don't know this, my kids don't know that. I'm telling you, they know everything. All right. You're also showing them that if people in a marriage should be sharing information, and you should be knowledgeable, and you should have your little independence within the marriage, so that you know what's going on within that's your community. So
that's great advice. Angela, what are some of the greatest obstacles, concerns, or problems that you've encountered around finances, now that we're on finances, when coaching clients?
So many things, transparency, integrity, that believing that somebody is going to do what was ordered or not ordered to do, money being shut off, bank accounts being emptied. So many, I think fear around money is one of the biggest concerns in the entire divorce process, aside from your children. The fear of money, not having money. How do I create money if I'm on my own as a single parent? So many things. But if your marriage, if your both spouses weren't transparent and forthcoming during the marriage, the likelihood of that now happening once a divorce action has started is not going to be very likely. There's more opportunity now to be deceitful or hide things or minimize assets and finances and things like that. So yeah, it's a big area that I help people work with, because maybe they're even unknown about it. They've been in the dark about it as well. That's a whole other area. If one spouse doesn't know what they even have.
It's a really good point that you shouldn't assume that or think that your spouse is going to be a better communicator about these things when you get a divorce than you were when you married. So to be aware of that, if there was a problem of finances in the marriage before, you're probably going to have a problem afterwards.
That's managing your expectations when you're getting divorced.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden you don't get divorced and somebody becomes the husband and the person that you wanted them to be. They're the same person before that you've lived with all this time. So that's not changing.
Right.
But just what people should know out there, just once a divorce action is started, there's automatic orders in place, which means that there's the person who's starting the action knows that there's automatic orders because you have to sign documents. And then the person who's getting served will know about it once they're served. But nothing's allowed to be transferred or depleted. There's like a stay in place once a divorce action starts. But you don't know what's depleted. You don't know what's being you have to know all that before. So that's why you just have to even if it's on the surface, know what's going on. Know I say to my clients, what's the LIPA bill? I don't know. What's the cable bill? I don't know. You know what? Open it up, see what it is. Mark it down. You just should know what it is. You know, it's important.
Very good. Very good. Joan and Victoria, are there signs about which of your clients will have the best outcomes? And, you know, what have you seen maybe not to do to be able to have a better outcome? And maybe Joan and Victoria have different perspectives on this.
When you say outcome, do you mean outcome in terms of a healthy divorce?
I think, you know, I'm not sure what this person meant in particular, but I would say, you know, Joan, maybe you can talk about, you know, outcomes in terms of, I would say both of you looking at it in terms of divorce.
Yeah. So there was a question as well that I read, something along the lines of, what are the predictors of a marriage going belly up, if you will? What are some of the predictors? And one of the things we look for is contempt, the way you communicate with each other. If there's contempt, chances are that relationship is not going to be salvageable. Another thing is criticism, how you criticize your spouse. Do you stonewall your spouse? Those are definitely things that will kill a relationship. Are you defensive? That's a really neat way as well to throw the blame on the other person. So these are some of the predictors of a marriage in trouble. Now, what are the predictors of a good outcome? A good outcome stems from both partners putting away their egos for a moment, putting away their defensiveness, and looking, especially if you have children, on how that's going to affect the children. And what do I want to do about that? I tell couples, bring a photograph to me, will you, with your children. And then I say to them, listen, your children are looking at you right now. What do you want them to learn? And it's really like a hot knife through butter. It's a humbling experience for them. So I say with a predictor for a healthy divorce is for both partners to be on the same page. We talk about finances, we talk about goodwill, both of them feeling, in spite of the anger and the hurt and everything else, how can we weather this storm? How can we move forward to going into a new relationship with each other, especially since our society is built on rituals, funerals, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, different things. How do we meet with each other in the future, even if we have different partners? And those are some of the things I work on with my couples. So we're talking about a healthy divorce. We're talking about ways to, you use the word narcissist. I would use the word just ways to put your ego, your self-esteem, leave that intact, park that there, and then ask yourself, in spite of the fact that maybe I was a rotten partner, in spite of that, I still choose to treat myself with respect. And how can we soldier on to a different stage in our lives together? I think that's very important, because we also don't try, even if we, what about our in-laws? Do we call them outlaws? What if they're going to miss us? And how do we deal with that? So those are all issues that I deal with in my practice.
Very nice. Victoria, what about you? You go with a little bit different when you're dealing.
Yeah, I have the other side of the spectrum because the people I work with, that's just not even an option for them, right? So there is no therapy or drug for someone who's really narcissistic, controlling, abusive. So my intention is to help my client learn how to live in conjunction with this person that they cannot communicate. It's in their worst interest to try to have a relationship with that person because it's so toxic. And it's actually healthier for the children to see, you know, I tell people you cannot create a healthy household for your children while living with the toxic partner. So the only way you're going to be able to show your children what a healthy, happy, normal, safe household looks like is to do it outside of that marriage. So you know, people think, well, I can't leave because I have children, or I have to stay for the children, or I'm going to wait until the children are gone, or whatever their fear is around staying for the children. It's really doing your children a disservice. And remember, I'm talking about the worst of the worst. I'm talking about people who are so toxic, there is no fixing them. So it's not someone who could go to therapy and be a better parent. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who's so far on the spectrum, there is no working with them. So what I help my clients get over the fear of, how am I going to be a single parent? How am I going to have enough money? How am I going to deal? I help them overcome that fear so that they know they can provide for themselves. They can provide for their children. There is a very good chance their partner, whether ordered or not, is going to make it very hard to get child support from them. It could drag on and on. So instead of thinking they're paralyzed and can't do anything because of this toxic personality, I help them see alternatives, ways that they can provide, ways that they can survive alone, and parallel parent, you know, the term for the other parents on their time, their way, you parent your way on your time. You don't make decisions together. I mean, you know, in a perfect world, you do co-parent together and you make decisions together. But when the other parent is going to use the children as pawns to sabotage you, then you can't parent together. It's not in anyone's best interest. So that's what I am teaching my clients to do.
And I agree with you totally, Victoria, because in fact, if you're dealing with an abusive situation, it is totally wrong to try and bring them together, because that's just going to create an enabling situation and a toxic one. So you're completely correct. I'm dealing with the other end of the
Yes, we agree. We agree totally.
Elizabeth,
two very good perspectives. Peter, what in a divorce can a person's asking? Can their husband have their mother be the beneficiary on their life insurance?
So you should know that the owner of an insurance policy is in complete control. But as Jill said, if they started a proceeding already, then there's a stay in action, I guess, to prevent any changes on any type of legal or financial instruments. So I would not think it would be permissive from a legal standpoint for someone to change their beneficiary or their ownership of their life insurance once they started the divorce process. Had they not started the divorce process, they're entitled to do whatever they want as an owner of a policy. It might not sit well with the beneficiary or the spouse, but it does happen. On the other hand, I'm sure it would be when they do an accounting of assets and future benefits, that might come into play as well.
Great, thank you.
there is a look back if somebody is contemplating divorce and all of a sudden the action didn't start yet, so the automatic orders aren't in place. But there is a look back if anything was changed over what period of time, like a short period of time. So, but in the matrimonial, if somebody's going to own the policy and keep the policy, there will be provisions that says that the beneficiary can be changed. So it can happen. So the answer is yes, it can happen. It just has to happen the right way and through the system. But what I wanted to mention to you, Elizabeth, if I can, to the people that are listening, is I'm also an attorney for children in Nassau County, where I represent children in very contested custody cases that the court appoints me to represent the children, not either parent. And some of my clients that I've represented when they were 10, 11 years old are now in college or grad school or law school or married, and I'm in touch with some of them. And the majority of them who I still speak to tell me that it was the worst thing that their parents did was to stay together because of them, or whether the mother or the father didn't want to leave, that they lived in such a toxic environment, and that they told it, like there's a consensus kind of, and I know that, you know, everybody could speak on it, that you can be a horrible partner, but that doesn't mean you're a horrible parent. So what didn't work in the relationship as husband and wife or as a partner, they could still be a good dad and mom, but they lose that when you stay together because it's just so toxic that the kids can't get the benefit of it. And it's really a consensus that these young adults tell me that I wish that my parents would have divorced a long time ago, that I didn't have to live through that. So it's interesting.
Wow, that's really, I mean, that's such wonderful way really to kind of bring it to a close, because that's such an important piece of advice. And quite honestly, we could keep this webinar going on for hours and hours. This panel is spectacular. I want to thank each and every one of you for giving us such valuable information and providing all of our attendees with all of your knowledge. So thank you so very much. I want to thank our attendees for joining us. You will get an email tomorrow with the contact information of all of our incredible panelists so that you can follow up with them, and hope that you do. So thank you again, panelists. You were incredible. My absolute honor to have you here. And all the attendees, thank you for joining Schnepp's webinar. This webinar will be available on the Schnepp's Media YouTube channel within 48 hours, so you can watch it again and share it with all your friends. And I wish you all a wonderful evening, and please stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.